Christos anesti. Christ is risen. Hey everyone, it's your host here, Paladin Hansen, back at it again with another video. And in this video, we'll be doing a peculiar topic, and that is the 37 miracles of Jesus. I took these miracles that we find in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John in the four Gospels, and we're going to just stitch them together and showcase to you guys the unique 37 miracles of Jesus H. Christ. So I hope you guys enjoy, sit back, relax, and have a good one.
On the third day there was a wedding in Cana, which is in the Galilee, and Yeshua's mother was there. Yeshua and his disciples were also among those invited to the wedding. When the wine ran out, the mother of Yeshua said to him, "They have no wine." Yeshua said to her, "What do I have to do with you, woman? My time has still not come." His mother said to the servers, "Do whatever he says to you." 6 stone pitchers were prepared according to the ordinance of the Yehudim for their purification. Each of them was able to hold 2 or 3 batim. Yeshua said to them, "Fill the pitchers with water." And they filled them to the top. He said, "Now draw some and take it to the master of the banquet." And they took it. The leader of the banquet tasted the water, which had turned into wine, not knowing where it was from. But his servers, who had drawn the water, knew. The leader of the banquet called to the groom and said to him, "Everyone gives out the good wine first, and after they have drunk to overflowing, he gives them the bad. But you have hidden the good wine until now." This was the first of the signs that Yeshua did in Cana, which is in the land of the Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. At the end of 2 days he went out from there to go to the Galilee, for Yeshua himself testified that a prophet has no honor in his native land. He entered the land of the Galilee, and the people of the Galilee took him in, because they saw all that he had done in Jerusalem in the days of the festival, for they also had gone up to celebrate the festival. Yeshua came a second time to Cana, which is in the Galilee, the place where he had made the water into wine. There was a man who was a servant of the king, whose son was sick in Capharnaum. When he heard that Yeshua had come from Yehuda to the land of the Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was about to die. Yeshua said to him, "If you do not see signs and wonders, you will not believe." The man, who was a servant of the king, said to him, "My master, please come down before my son dies." Yeshua said to him, "Go, your son is alive." The man believed the word that Yeshua spoke to him and left. When he came down, his servants encountered him and gave him the good news that his son was alive. He inquired of them the hour that he felt better, and they said to him, "Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the fever faded." His father knew that this was the hour when Yeshua had said to him, "Your son is alive." He believed, and so did his entire house. This was the second sign that Yeshua did when he came from Yehuda to the land of the Galilee. They came to Capharnaum, and he immediately went on Shabbat in the synagogue and taught. They were astonished by his teaching, because he was teaching them as a man of authority, and not like the Sopharim. Now there was a man in their synagogue in whom there was a spirit of impurity. And he cried out, saying, "Alas, what do we have to do with you, Yeshua HaNotzri? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Yeshua reprimanded it, saying, "Be silent and come out from him." The spirit of impurity dragged him and cried out with a loud voice, and it went out from him. Everyone was alarmed, and each man asked his neighbor, saying, "What is this? What is this new teaching, that he even commands the spirits of impurity with power, and they listen to him?" And the news of him quickly went out into all of the areas surrounding the land of the Galilee. Yeshua entered the home of Petros and saw his mother-in-law bedridden and sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever faded, and she got up and served them. At evening time they brought him many who were gripped by demons, and he drove out the spirits with the word of his mouth, and he healed all the sick, fulfilling what Yeshaiah the prophet spoke, saying, He has lifted our sicknesses and carried our sufferings. As the crowd of people pressed to hear the word of God, he was standing by the sea of Genesar. He saw 2 boats lying by the sea. The fishermen had gotten out of them and were cleaning their nets. He went down into one of the boats that belonged to Shimon, and asked him to bring it out a little way from the land into the sea. He sat and taught the people from the middle of the boat. When he finished speaking, he said to Shimon, "Take it out to the deep area of the sea and let your nets down to catch." Shimon answered and said to him, "Teacher, all night we have grown weary, but we have not caught anything. But as you say, I will let down my net." He did so and caught so many fish that their net was torn. They waved their hands to their friends who were in the second boat to come to them and help them, and they came and filled the 2 boats to the point of sinking. When Shimon Petros saw this, he fell at Yeshua's knees and said, "My master, please leave me, for I am a sinner," because of the fish that they had caught. Astonishment had gripped him and all who were with him, as well as Yaakov and Yochanan, sons of Zabdi, who had been associates of Shimon. Yeshua said to Shimon, "Do not fear. From now on you will surely catch men." They led the boat to the land, and they left everything and followed him. A man who was a Matzorah came to him, and he pleaded with him and fell down on his knees and said to him, "If you are willing, you are able to purify me." Yeshua had compassion on him. He reached out his hand and touched him and said, "I am willing. Be pure." While he was speaking, the Zara'at departed from him, and he became pure. He warned him and quickly took him outside. He said to him, "See to it that you do not tell anything to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest, and make the sacrifice for your purification that Moshe commanded as a testimony to them." But he went out and began to proclaim profusely and make the matter heard, until he could no longer come to the city in the sight of the people. So he sat outside the city in desolate places, and they came to him from all the surrounding regions. After he finished speaking all his words in the hearing of the people, he came to Capharnaum. A servant of one of the centurions was deathly ill, and he was very dear to him. He heard the news of Yeshua, so he sent him men from the elders of the Yehudim, and asked him to come and save his servant. They came to Yeshua and pleaded strongly with him and said, "It is appropriate for you to carry out his request, because he loves our people and built the synagogue for us." Yeshua went with them. When he drew near the house, the centurion sent his friends to him, saying, "My master, please do not be burdened by me, for I am not worthy for you to come in the shade of my roof. On account of this, I do not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But please say a word, and my boy will be healed. For I myself am a man placed under authority, and there are soldiers under my command. I tell one, 'Go,' and he goes, and another, 'Come,' and he comes, and my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." Yeshua heard his words and was amazed by them. He turned and said to the crowd following him, "I say to you, even in Yisrael I have not found faith as great as this." The messengers returned to the house and found the sick servant, and he was healed. After some days he came a second time to Capharnaum, and they heard that he was in the house. Many were quickly gathered until there was no room to stand, even in front of the entrance, and he spoke the word to them. Some men came to him carrying a paralyzed man. 4 men carried him, but they were not able to approach him on account of the people. So they removed the roof in the place where he was, and made an opening and lowered the bed on which the paralytic was lying. When Yeshua saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "My son, your sins are forgiven." But some of the Sopharim were sitting there, and they said in their hearts, "What is this to this one, that he speaks such blasphemies? Who can forgive sins except God alone?" But Yeshua knew in his Ruach that they were thinking this in their hearts. And he said to them, "Why are you thinking such things in your hearts? What is easier, to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Arise, carry your bed, and walk'? But in order that you may know that the Son of Man has the authority to forgive sins on the earth." He said to the paralytic, "To you I say, arise, pick up your bed, and walk home." Suddenly he arose and picked up his bed and went out in the sight of everyone, at which point they were all amazed and praised Elohim, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." He returned and came to the synagogue, and a man was there whose hand was withered. They waited in ambush for him if he would heal on Shabbat, so they could find an accusation against him. He said to the man whose hand was withered, "Arise, stand in the middle." He said to them, "Is it permitted on Shabbat to do evil or to do good, to rescue life or to put to death?" And they were silent. Then he turned and looked intently at them in anger, and was grieved at the hardness of their hearts. He said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." And he stretched out his hand. It was healed and returned to being like the other one. The Prushim quickly went out and deliberated against him with the men of Hordos to destroy him. The next day he went to a town named Naim. Many of his Talmudim were walking with him, and there was a large crowd of people. When he drew near the gate of the town, people were bringing out a dead person, the only son of his mother, who was a widow. Many of the people of the town were with her. When the master saw her, he was moved with compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." He approached and touched the bed, and those carrying it stood still. He said, "Young man, I say to you, arise." The dead person awoke and began to speak, and he gave him to his mother. Trembling gripped all of them, and they praised Elohim. They said, "A great Nevi has arisen in our midst, and Elohim has taken note of his people." This word about him went out throughout Yehuda and the entire plain. He went down to the boat, and his Talmudim went down with him. There was a great storm on the sea, to the point where the waves would cover the boat, but he was sleeping. His Talmudim approached him and woke him, saying, "Save us, our master, we are perishing." He said to them, "Small ones in faith, why are you afraid?" He got up, reprimanded the winds and the sea, and there was a great silence. The men were amazed and said, "Who is he, then, that even the winds and the sea listen to him?" When he came to the other side of the sea, to the land of the Gadreim, 2 men were gripped by demons, met him as they were coming out from the tombs, and they were so belligerent that no one was able to cross that road. They were screaming, saying, "What do we have to do with you, Yeshua ben Elohim? Have you come here to afflict us when it is not time?" There was a herd of many pigs there, grazing at a distance from them. The demons begged him, saying, "If you drive us out, let us enter the herd of pigs." He said to them, "Go." They came out and entered the herd of pigs, and the entire herd of pigs rushed down the slope into the sea, and they died in the water. The herders fled, and they came to the town and told about everything that had happened to the men gripped by demons. Then the entire town went out to meet Yeshua, and when they saw him, they requested that he leave their region. One of the leaders of the synagogue came, whose name was Yair. He saw him and fell at his feet. He strongly begged him, saying, "My little daughter is sick to the point of dying. Please come and place your hands on her, so that she may be saved and live." He went with him, and a large crowd followed him, and they were passing against him. There was a woman with a flow of blood for 12 years. She suffered very much under the hands of many healers, and she spent all that she had, but to no avail. Rather, her ailment had become very severe. When she heard the news of Yeshua, she came to the middle of the crowd of people from behind him and touched his garment. For she said, "If I just touch his clothes, I will be saved." The source of her blood suddenly became dry, and she discerned in her basar that her affliction was healed, and in a moment Yeshua knew in his soul that power had gone out from him, and he turned into the middle of the people and said, "Who touched my clothes?" His Talmudim said to him, "You see the crowd pressing against you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" But he looked around intently to see the one who had done this. The woman was afraid and trembled because she knew what had happened to her. But she came and fell before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "My daughter, Your faith has saved you. Go in shalom, and be revived from your affliction." While he was speaking, men came from the house of the synagogue leader and said, "Your daughter has died. Why bother the teacher any further?" But when Yeshua heard the word that they had said, he said to the synagogue leader, "Do not fear, just have faith." He did not allow anyone to go with him except Petros, Yaakov, and Yochanan, the brother of Yaakov. He came to the house of the synagogue leader and saw the commotion of those loudly weeping and wailing. He came and said to them, "Why are you moaning and weeping? The young woman is not dead. She is only sleeping." They mocked him, but he sent them all out. And he took the father of the young woman and her mother and the men who were with him, and he came to the room where the young woman was lying. He grasped the hand of the young woman and said to her, "Talita kumi," which is interpreted, "Girl, I say to you, please arise." Immediately the girl got up and walked around. She was 12 years old, and they were greatly astonished. But he warned them strictly, saying, "Do not make the matter known to anyone." And he commanded them to give her something to eat. Yeshua passed on from there, and 2 blind men followed him, and they were shouting, saying, "Be gracious to us, Ben David." And when he came to the house, the blind men approached him, and Yeshua said to them, "Do you believe that it is in my hand to do this?" They said, "Yes, our master." He touched their eyes and said, "May it be to you according to your faith." Their eyes were opened, and Yeshua warned them, and he said, "Make sure that it is not made known to anyone." But when they left, they proclaimed the news throughout the whole land. They went out, and then people brought to him a mute man gripped by a demon. He drove out the demon, and the mute man began to speak. And the crowd of people was amazed and said, "Nothing like this has ever been seen in Yisrael." After these things, there was a moed for the Yehudim, and Yeshua went up to Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, there was a pool near Sha'ar Hatzon, which is called in the Hebrew language Beit Chazda. It has 5 stoas. There lay many sick, blind, lame, and weak people who were waiting for the water to move, for an angel descended at its appointed time to the pool and agitated the water in it. The first one to go down into it after the water churned would be healed from every ailment that clung to him. There was a certain man with a disease for 38 years. Yeshua saw him lying there, and knew that the days of his disease were very long. He said to him, "Do you desire to be healed?" The sick man answered, "My master, there is no one with me to cast me into the pool when the water is agitated, and before I come, someone else goes down before me." Yeshua said to him, "Arise, carry your bed and walk." Instantly, the man regained his strength, picked up his bed and walked. That day was the day of Shabbat. Afterward, Yeshua went out to the other side of the Galil, which is of Tivaria. A large crowd of people followed him, because they saw his signs that he had done with the sick. Yeshua went up on the mountain, and sat there along with his Talmudim. The days of Pesach, a festival of the Yehudim, were on the brink of arrival. Yeshua lifted his eyes, and saw many people coming to him, and said to Philippos, "Where will we buy lechem for them to eat?" But he said this to test him, because he knew what he would do. Philippos answered, "We would not find enough lechem with 200 dinarim for each man to take even a little." One of his Talmudim, Andrai, brother of Shimon Petros, said to him, "Look, a young man is with us, who has 5 loaves of barley bread and 2 fish, although what are they for so many people?" Yeshua said, "Command the people to sit on the ground." There was plenty of green grass in that place, so they sat on the ground. About 5,000 men in number. Yeshua took the loaves of lechem, made a bracha, and gave them to his Talmudim. The Talmudim gave them to those reclining. They did the same with the fish, as much as their soul craved. When they were satisfied, he said to his Talmudim, "Gather the pieces of lechem that are left over, so that nothing will be lost." They gathered it and filled 12 baskets from the pieces of 5 loaves of barley bread left over by those who ate them. Then Yeshua urged his Talmudim to go down into the boat to cross ahead of him to the other side of the sea, until he had sent away the people. He sent the people away and went up the mountain alone to pray. It was evening, and he was there alone. Now the boat had come halfway across the sea, and the waves were tearing it apart, for there was a wind against it. During the fourth watch, Yeshua came to them, walking on the surface of the water. His Talmudim saw him walking on the surface of the sea, and were terrified. They said, "Is it the appearance of a spirit?" And they cried out in fright. Yeshua called quickly to them, "Be strong, for it is I. Do not fear." Petros answered and said to him, "If it is you, Master, please command, and I will come to you on the water." He said, "Come." And Petros went down from the boat and walked on the surface of the water to come to Yeshua. When he saw that the wind was strong, he became afraid and began to sink, and he cried out and said, "Master, save me." Yeshua quickly reached out his hand, took hold of him, and said to him, "Small one in faith, why is your heart divided?" They went up into the boat, and the wind subsided. Then the men in the boat approached and bowed down to him and said, "Surely you are the Son of God." He rose up from there and went to the regions of Zor and Zidon. And when he came to the house, he did not want it to be known to anyone. But he was not able to be hidden, because a woman whose little daughter, a spirit of impurity, had entered, had heard the news of him, and she came and fell at his feet. Now the woman was Greek, and her native land was Panikia of Syria. She requested of him to drive out the demon from her daughter. Yeshua said to her, "Let the children be satisfied first, since it is not good to take the bread of children and throw it to the little dogs." She answered and said to him, "Yes, Master, but even the little dogs eat under the table from the crumbs of the children's lechem." He said to her, "On account of this statement of yours, go. The demon has left your daughter." She returned home and found the girl lying on the bed, and the demon had come out from her. Again he went out from the region of Zor and Zidon, and came to the Sea of the Galil, with the region of the 10 cities. They brought him a man who was deaf and mute, and they begged him to place his hand on him. He took him alone from the midst of the crowd. Then he placed his fingers in his ears, spat, and touched his tongue. He looked intently toward heaven and sighed. He said to him, "Ipatach," which is interpreted, "Be opened." In a moment, his ears were opened, and the binding of his tongue was loosened, and he spoke with clear language. He commanded them not to tell anyone, but the more he warned them, the more they made it heard. They were extremely astonished and said, "He does everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." In those days, when a large group of people were gathered but had nothing to eat, Yeshua called to his Talmudim and said to them, "I feel compassion for the people, because for these 3 days they have stood with me, and they have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will faint on the way, because some of them have come from a faraway place." His Talmudim answered and said to him, "From where could anyone satisfy all these with lechem here in the wilderness?" He asked them and said, "How many loaves of lechem do you have?" They said, 7. He commanded the people to sit on the ground, and he took the 7 loaves of lechem and made a bracha. Then he broke them and gave them to his Talmudim to place before them. And they placed them before the people. They had a few small fish, and he made a bracha, and said to place these before them as well. They ate and were satisfied, and they picked up 7 pots from the leftover pieces. Those who ate were about 4,000. Then he sent them away. They arrived at Beit Zeda, and they brought to him a blind man and begged him to touch him. He grasped the hand of the blind man and led him outside the village. He spit in his eyes and placed his hands on him and asked him and said to him, "Do you see?" He looked intently and said, "I see the sons of men, that they are walking. I see them like trees." He placed his hands on his eyes a second time. His eyes were opened and he was healed, and he saw everything well, even at a distance. He sent him to his home and said to him, "Do not come inside the village, and do not speak to anyone in the village." As they came to the crowd of people, a man approached him and got down on his knees across from him and said, "My master, please have compassion on my son, because he is struck by the moon, and his illness is severe. Often he falls into the fire, and often in the midst of the water. I brought him to your Talmudim, but they were not able to heal him." Yeshua answered and said, "Alas, O crooked generation that lacks faith! How long will I be with you? How long will I bear you? Bring him here to me." Yeshua reprimanded the demon and left him, and the young man was healed from that hour. The Talmudim approached Yeshua when he was alone, and they said, "Why were we not able to drive it out?" Yeshua said to them, "It is because of the lack in your faith. For amen, I say to you, if you have faith like a mustard seed, and you tell this mountain, 'Be moved from here to there,' it will be moved from its place. There is nothing that will be impossible for you. But this type only comes out with prayer and fasting." As they came to Kafar Nehum, the collectors of the half-shekel approached Petros and said, "Does your Rav not give the half-shekel?" He said, "He will give it." But when he came to the house, Yeshua came first to ask, saying, "What is your opinion, Shimon? The kings of the earth, from whom do they take taxes and customs? From their own children or from foreigners?" Petros said to him, "From foreigners." Yeshua said to him, "If so, then the children are exempt. But nonetheless, in order that we will not be an obstacle to them, go to the sea, throw a fishhook into it, and take the first fish that comes up. When you open its mouth, you will find an istira. Take it, and pay on my behalf and yours." While passing through, he saw a man who was blind from the day of his birth. His Talmudim asked him, saying, "Rabbi, who is the sinner? Is it he or his parents, since he was born blind?" Yeshua answered, "Neither he sinned nor did his parents, but it was so that the works of Elohim may be revealed in him. I must do the deeds of the one who sent me whilst it is still day. The night will come when no one will be able to do so. While I am still in the world, I am the Or of the world." When he had spoken this, he spat upon the ground, made mud from the saliva, and smeared the mud on the eyes of the blind man. He said to him, "Go and wash in the pool of Shiloach," which means sent. He went and washed and came back with seeing eyes. His neighbors and those who saw that he was blind before said, "Is he not the one who sits and asks for tzedakah?" Some said, "This is the one." Others said, "He just looks like him." But he said, "It is I." They said to him, "How are your eyes opened?" He answered and said, "A man named Yeshua made mud and smeared it on my eyes and said to me, 'Wash in the Shiloach pool.' I went and washed, and my eyes were opened." They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." One day Yeshua was driving out a demon that was mute. When the demon came out, the mute person spoke, and the people were amazed. On the day of Shabbat, he was teaching in a certain synagogue, and a woman in whom there was a spirit of disease for 18 years was bent over and unable to stand with a straight posture. Yeshua saw and called to her. He said to her, "Woman, be freed from your disease." He placed his hands upon her, and instantly she arose and stood upright and praised Elohim. On Shabbat, as he entered the house of one of the leading Prushim to eat lechem, they were waiting in ambush for him. There was a certain man in front of him whose body was swollen with water. Yeshua responded and said to the sages and Prushim, "Is it permitted to heal on Shabbat or not?" They were silent. He grasped him and healed him and sent him away. He answered and said to them, "Which one of you, if his donkey or ox fell into a well, would not quickly lift it out on the day of Shabbat?" They did not know how to answer him. On his way to Yerushalayim, he was passing between Shomron and the Galil. As he came to a certain village, 10 Metzoraim came to greet him. They stood at a distance. They lifted their voice and called, "Yeshua, teacher, be gracious to us." He saw them and said to them, "Go and be shown to the priests." When they went, they were purified. When one of them saw that he was healed, he returned and praised Elohim with a loud voice. He fell on his face at his feet and thanked him. He was a Shomroni. Were not 10 purified? Where are the other 9? Was not anyone found that would return to give glory to Elohim except for this one foreigner? He said to him, "Arise and go. Your faith has saved you." There was a sick man, Lazar, from Beit Hini, the village of Miriam and her sister Marta. This is the Miriam that applied perfume to the master and wiped his feet dry with her hair. Lazar, her brother, was sick. His sisters sent for him, saying, "My master, look, the one you love is sick." Yeshua heard this and said, "This illness is not for death. Rather, it is for the glory of Elohim, so that the Son of Elohim may be glorified in it." Yeshua loved Marta and her sister and Lazar. When he heard that he was sick, he delayed and remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Afterward, he said to his Talmudim, "Come, and let us return to the land of Yehuda." His Talmudim said to him, "Rabbi, just now the Yehudim were seeking to stone you, and you would go back there?" Yeshua answered, "Are there not 12 hours in a day? If anyone walks by the day, he will not stumble, because he sees the or of this world. The one who walks in the night will stumble, because the or is not in him." After he spoke things like this, he said to them, "Our beloved Lazar is asleep. I am going so that I may wake him." His Talmudim said to him, "My master, if he is sleeping, he will recover." Yeshua was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about sleeping for rest. Then Yeshua said to them plainly, "Lazar is dead. I am glad for your sake that I was not there, so that you may believe. And now let us travel and go to him." Toma, who is called Dudumos, said to his fellow Talmudim, "Let us go as well, so that we may die with him." Yeshua came and found him, who had been lying in the tomb for the last 4 days. Beit Hini is near Yerushalayim, about 15 reis away. Many of the Yehudim came to the home of Marta and Miriam to console them regarding their brother. When Marta had heard that Yeshua had come, she went out to greet him, but Miriam remained in the house. Marta said to Yeshua, "My master, if only you had been here, for then my brother would have not died. Even now I know that whatever you ask of Elohim, Elohim will give you." Yeshua said to her, "Your brother will surely arise." Marta said to him, "I know that he will rise on the rising of the last day, on the resurrection." Yeshua said to her, "I am the rising and the life. I am the resurrection. The one who believes in me will live, even though he dies. Anyone living who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this word?" She said to him, "Yes, my master, I believe that you are the Mashiach, the Son of God, who has come to the world." Having said this, she went and called for her sister Miriam privately, saying, "Look, the teacher is here, and he is calling for you." When she heard this, she arose and came to him. Yeshua had not yet entered the village, for he was still standing in the place where Marta had encountered him. When the Yehudim, who had come to her house to console her, saw that Miriam had risen suddenly and gone out, they followed her. For they said, "She has gone to the tomb to weep there." Miriam came to the place where Yeshua was standing. She saw him, fell at his feet, and said to him, "My master, if only you had been here, for then my brother would not have died." When Yeshua saw her weeping, and the Yehudim who had come with her weeping as well, his ruach became indignant, and he trembled. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "My master, come and see." Yeshua wept. The Yehudim said, "How great is the love that he had for him!" But there were some who said, "Is not one who opens the eyes of the blind also able to prevent him from dying?" Once more Yeshua grew indignant in his ruach, and came to the tomb, which was a cave with a stone over its entrance. Yeshua said, "Remove the stone from it." Marta, the sister of the deceased, said to him, "My master, he has already begun to sink, for he had been 4 days dead." Yeshua said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will behold the glory of Elohim?" They removed the stone where the deceased was placed, and Yeshua lifted his eyes high and said, "I thank you, my Father, Abba, for you have answered me. I know that you always answer me. However, on account of these people who are around me, I have spoken so that they will believe in me, that you have sent me." When he finished speaking, he called out in a loud voice, "Lazar, arise, come out." The deceased came out, his hands and feet wrapped in burial garments, and his face covered with a headscarf. Yeshua said to them, "Release him, and let him go on his way." When many of the Yehudim who had come to Miriam saw what Yeshua did, they believed on him. As they went out from Jericho, he, his Talmudim, and a large crowd of people, Bartimai ben Timai, a blind man, was sitting beside the road asking for tzedakah. He heard that this was Yeshua HaNotzri, and began crying out. He said, "Please, Ben David, Yeshua, be gracious to me." Many reprimanded him to silence him, but he only increased his yelling, "Ben David, be gracious to me." Yeshua stood still and said, "Call him." They called the blind man and said to him, "Be strong, arise, he has called you." He threw off his cloak and arose and came to Yeshua. Yeshua answered and said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "Rabboni, that I would see." Then Yeshua said to him, "Go, your faith has saved you." In a moment his eyes were opened, and he followed Yeshua on the road. In the morning he returned to the city, and he was hungry. He saw a fig tree beside the road, and he drew near to it, but found nothing on it except the leaves. He said to it, "From now on there shall not be fruit from you ever again." Suddenly the fig tree withered. The Talmudim saw this and were amazed. They said, "How did the fig tree wither so suddenly?" Yeshua answered and said to them, "Amen, I say to you, if you have faith and your heart is not divided, you will do things like the deed of the fig tree. You will even say to this mountain, 'Be lifted up and move into the middle of the sea,' and it will be so. All that you ask in the prayer, if you believe, will come to you." While he was speaking, there came a crowd of people, and one of the 12, who was called Yehuda, was going before them. He drew near to Yeshua to kiss him. Yeshua said to him, "Yehuda, are you betraying the Son of Man with a kiss?" The men who were with him saw what was going to happen and said to him, "Our master, should we strike with a sword?" One of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. Yeshua responded and said, "Enough, now desist." He touched his ear and healed it. It was morning light, and Yeshua was standing on the seashore, but his Talmudim did not know that he was Yeshua. Yeshua said to them, "My sons, do you have anything to eat?" They said, "Lo." He said to them, "Cast your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." They cast it, and they were no longer able to draw it in due to the abundance of fish. The Talmudim whom Yeshua loved said to Petros, "Look, the Master." When Shimon Petros heard that it was the Master, he wrapped his cloak around his waist because he was naked and threw himself into the sea. The rest of the Talmudim came in the boat, since they were not far from the land, only about 200 amot, and they drew in the net with the fish. When they came up to the land, they saw that there were burning coals arranged with fish on them and bread to eat. Yeshua said to them, "Bring the fish that you just caught." Shimon and Petros came up and drew the net on the land. It was full of large fish, 153, and yet the net was not torn, even though there were so many. Yeshua said to them, "Come, eat lechem." But there was not one of his Talmudim whose heart filled him to ask, "Who are you?" For they knew that he was the Master. Yeshua came and took the lechem and gave it, and the fish to them. This was the third time that Yeshua appeared to his disciples, his Talmudim, after he rose from the dead.